If we only knew in 2000 what we know now, we'd have a lot more success. And planting guidelines evolve and change as we learn more. What have we learned? We've learned that you take a 2-year-old seedling, a 3-year-old seedling, and immerse that into a mass of grassland roots. Some of those grasses emit biotoxins to the seedling. You've got mice, you've got deer, meadow voles, apathy from people, and lack of knowledge. That's what causes failures for these riparian buffers. And they publish a report card every year. In 2012, this was the report card. I want you to pay particular attention to forested buffers. Look at all the D's and F's up there. B+ for riparian buffers. And that's what I'm talking about. Each state in the Chesapeake Bay was to submit to EPA their plan to delist the Chesapeake Bay from the dirty waters list. Each state did that. Now Virginia did it a couple times because the first one wasn't good enough, so Virginia did it again. And it was accepted and approved by the EPA. Well, the American Farm Bureau sued the EPA for this Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint because it wasn't based on science. They overstepped their bounds, etc., etc. And this case was heard in federal district court in Judge Sylvia Rambo's court. And the lawyer for the American Farm Bureau argued against a restored bay. This is what he said: if they can do it here, they can do it anywhere. Don't we want a restored bay? Think of all the jobs, more fish, more crabs, more everything if we had a restored bay, if we had a restored Gulf. You know, so of course, when we finish cleaning up the bay, we're going to move over to the Gulf. We're going to get that cleaned up too. But remember, in the 60s, the bay was at its worst and it's coming back up. So what we're doing is working. So we need to keep going. And this is my definition of a riparian buffer: a vegetated area adjacent to a hydric feature capable of reducing the impact of adjacent land uses. Now that used to be the standard definition until Stroud and some other outfits said, and it supplies the hydric feature with sufficient inputs for a healthy aquatic ecosystem. Now, this was a lucky one. Now, all across the Bay watershed anyway, we're seeing small watersheds where the people get together and say, you know what, we are going to restore our little watershed. We're going to fence the cattle out. We're going to plant some trees. We're going to get some scientists in there to, here's Pogue Run, there's the cows in there. Guess what the fecal count was there? Over 3,000 colony-forming units per 100 milliliters of water. Wow. So we fence the cows out. We plant some native stuff. We get Trout Unlimited to come in there and put some temperature sensors in to make sure the water's cool enough for trout. And we stock it with trout. So when you go to Stanton, you can go see Shakespeare play, bring your fishing pole. No kidding. So we're seeing this now. After 13 years of doing this, we're seeing small watersheds here, there. We're working on it. That's what we're doing. That's why you all are here. That's what we're wanting to do in the Bay watershed. This is enough. That's all we did. So let's talk about what I have experienced and why seedlings fail to establish. Number one, we started off with the poor seedling. And right now in Virginia, You're not supposed to plant a seedling that's less than 1/4 inch in diameter at the collar or 18 inches tall. If it doesn't meet that criteria, David isn't going to plant it. Reject. Don't do it. Next, the stake for the tree shelter breaks. Now, how many buffers have y'all gone by and see, look at all these shelters that are leaning over. Now, guess what that does? Well, not only, your tree might live, I doubt it, because a vole is going to get in that tube because you've opened it up. There's a little crack at the bottom. A vole is going to go right in there, and it's called a vole hotel. You take that tube off and shake it off, and you're going to have 5 voles fall out and a stick, which was your tree. Now, in Virginia, it has to be a stake from Quercus alba, not Quercus anything else. Alba, white oak, only, or a treated stake, a pressure-treated stake, salt-treated stake, something like that. Right, David? Lowry? So, that's the only 2 stakes you can use in Virginia. And don't use rebar, nothing else. Wrong tree for the site. Now, your experienced tree planters know what they're doing. And I would, if you're going to have it done for you, I would be looking at their references where they planted. This is really important. You don't put a Quercus alba in the wet area. You want to put a willow oak in there. Improper installation. All this we can determine. Now, improper installation would be there's a lot there's only one way to plant a tree right, and that the tree shelter has got to be installed right too. It needs to be scoonched down into the soil 2 to 3 inches, because that's your barrier to the biggest problem out there, and that's meadowvoles. So you get that shelter down in the ground, the vole comes along, can't get in there, they turn around and go somewhere else. Next, you're planting that tree into tall fescue. Most likely, if you're in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, you've got tall fescue. Most of our meadows, hay fields, pasture fields are dominated by this non-native, invasive, toxic plant. Tall fescue, we should never plant another seed of tall fescue in this country. It's one of the most invasive non-native plants in North America. It has allelopathic characteristics. I'll show you the research. But it's like planting your tomato under a black walnut. It's going to die. So you have to suppress the tall fescue somehow. And you either have to install your turf mat correctly and stay on it, or you need to just outright kill the fescue. We can do that with chemicals, or we can till it to death. There's all kinds of ways to do it. And these grasslands are tremendous habitat for meadowvoles. And back in the day, we used 2-foot tubes. We now know from science that just going to a 4-foot tube increases your chances a whole lot. So now in Virginia, if you're planting a tree, now not a shrub, I'm talking about trees, you either have to plant 300 trees per acre or 110 with 4-foot shelters. That's our new rule. Tree shelters. I'm a strong advocate of shelters. Stroud is. I don't. It's kind of like global warming. There's only a few weirdos out there that don't think we're warming. Tree shelters are the same way. You better put one on there. The science tells you, put it on there. Best case scenario, plant the right tree in the right spot, the right way, reduce your fescue presence, and then manage for success by spot spraying for invasive and replace broken stakes. If you do that, you're going to have canopy closure in 10 years. I promise you. Would you agree? That's what we're trying to do. Now, your invasives has to do with sociology. And if you've got a field full of teasel and Canadian thistle, your neighbor is going to hate you. You know, and it's going to hurt the program. You know, the neighbors are going, you think I want that on my farm? How many times have I heard that? So, being a neighbor that gets along with their neighbors is good for the program and it's good for you. So, I would recommend that we try to control these invasives that upset people. Teasel, you know, it's a biennial. It's not native, and it does spread to other farms. So we need to keep that in check. Musk thistle's another one. Now here's a whole field full of Canadian thistle. Now, what do you think the neighbors are talking about that? You know, you think they're going to get in the CREP program? I don't think so. Your neighbor's not going to want to do that. If that is CREP, I don't want it. And in Virginia, I think we missed the target. We planted our trees and then walked away. And this is what happens. What we need in the CREP program is a lot of management, money, and technical assistance, because those first 5 years are so critical to that. I had a great career with them, but you know, I didn't have a reputation to sugarcoat anything either. You know, I was lucky I made it to retirement, really. And they don't mow your shelters down. You will be able to see your shelters, see your trees, and be able to inspect them, take the shelter off, prune the tree, take a weed out of there. You know, a multiflora rose will grow just as good in a shelter as your Quercus alba. You know, so you need to get that thing out of there. If it's in your shelter, tall fescue. If you didn't scalp it good enough, a tall fescue loves being in that little greenhouse. And controlling invasives. Now, here's our goal. This is really our goal. The quicker we can get canopy closure, the quicker our invasives are going to subside, the quicker we're going to have native leaves to get in the water, to start fueling that benthic community that Stroud has proven is 2 to 8 times more capable of detoxifying itself. Now let me say that one more time. If we have the native trees that are supplying the bottom of the food chain for the water, all those macroinvertebrates, all that energy there has 2 to 8 times the power to detoxify itself. In other words, take the nitrogen out, take chemicals out, whatever.